Our journey begins in a place unlike any other, an isolated stretch of volcanic land where the Earth's crust carries the memory of unimaginable violence. At first, it feels like any other place on Earth with dry soil that crunches underfoot. Harmless boulders which crouch in the sand like silent guardians, and wind-carving faint ripples across the ground. A place where travelers pass through without taking a second glance. But the deeper you walk into this stretch of land, the more your instincts tug at you, not because of predators or storms, as those would be easy to understand, but because of something far quieter, something almost invisible. The first anomaly was documented in the Afar Depression of Ethiopia, one of the most geologically active regions on the planet. A landscape pulled apart by tectonic rifts, baked by 50-degree heat, and carved by rivers of ancient lava now cooled into dark basalt plains. It begins with a shape on the ground, a faint angle where none should be, a stretch of darkness that seems off. His shadow, cast by the same sun lighting your face, bends just slightly, not enough to frighten you, but enough to confuse you. The top leans east, the bottom leans north, a direction that doesn't align with where the sun actually is. You blink, look again, and it still doesn't make sense. You step forward. Your own shadow joins the anomaly. The legs elongate even though the sun is high, the outline tilts, though nothing around you has changed, and for a moment you wonder if your vision is failing. But then you see it everywhere. Rocks casting shadows at mismatched angles, a ridge behind you producing a silhouette that faces the wrong way, even a simple walking stick when planted in the soil splitting its shadow like a forked branch. Nothing looks strange until you watch the ground and see something your brain can't quite explain. Welcome to the place where shadows do not obey the sun. In the natural world, shadows are honest, predictable, loyal to the geometry of the universe, and the rules they follow are ancient. When the sun is high, shadows shrink. When it sinks low, they stretch long. When the sun shifts east, shadows point west. When the sun shifts west, they answer east. As Earth tilts, rotates, and spins, shadows change with perfect mathematical obedience. Shadows never lie. They follow the sun with perfect obedience. But here, in the Afar Depression, the rules collapse. Although the sun is exactly where it should be, its rays strike the land cleanly, and the mathematics of light hold steady. Yet the shadows forget the script. They stretch when the sun is high. They shrink at sunset. They twist in directions that should be physically impossible. And the more you observe, the more your senses resist explanation. Something else is rewriting the laws of light here. In Ethiopia, the 19th century traders crossing the Afar lowlands wrote of shadows that leaned away from their owners, blaming dehydration or desert glare. Then came early photographs from the 1920s with grainy, sun-bleached images where men and camels cast silhouettes that didn't align with the angle of the light. The photographer blamed a damaged lens, and historians dismissed the pictures as artifacts of poor exposure. No one questioned the sun. No one considered the land. Over the decades, travelers continued to report strange accounts of shadows sliding sideways, objects casting silhouettes longer on one side than the other, and children pointing at the ground, puzzled, asking why their outlines leaned like they were tired. These claims were brushed aside as exaggerations, mirages, or simple misunderstandings as scientists waved them off, insisting there was no physical mechanism for such behavior. Light travels straight, shadows obey geometry. And to suggest otherwise was to propose that reality itself was bending. People called it folklore, a trick of rough terrain. a myth born from the desert's heat. But the reports didn't stop. They multiplied. And slowly, reluctantly, the world began to realize the same truth the wanderers had seen long ago. This was no longer a myth. It wasn't a trick of the eye. It was a puzzle. And the world had just begun to notice. In the quiet corners of academic circles and geological forums, murmurs grew until finally someone decided to investigate the place where shadows misbehaved, marking the beginning of one of the most peculiar scientific expeditions of our time. The first scientific team arrived under a harsh, unforgiving sun, their equipment glinting against the pale plateau, coming with one purpose: to solve a mystery the world had laughed at for a century. They began with laser measurements, simple tests, straight beams of coherent light projected across flat ground. And the results were immediate and unsettling as the laser lines curved slightly but undeniably. The readings showed the beams struck the ground at an angle different from what the sun indicated, as if a subtle force was redirecting how light behaved within the boundary of the region. To confirm, they launched drones. From above, the terrain mapped normally, every contour, ridge, and shadow appearing exactly as it should. But the moment the drones dropped lower, just a few meters above the ground, their shadow mapping systems began to malfunction. Angles became inconsistent, lengths fluctuated, and the same object cast 3 different shadows depending on altitude. Then came the solar angle calculations. At noon, when shadows should nearly disappear, they stretched. At sunset, when shadows should dominate the land, they shrank. Data didn't lie. Cameras didn't malfunction. Instruments didn't hallucinate. Something in the region was altering the path of light itself, subtly but persistently. When the scientists ran a full 3D terrain scan, the anomaly finally revealed its hand. The sun wasn't the problem. The light wasn't breaking any cosmic law. The land was. Shadows bent because the ground beneath them bent the rules. Light entered the region clean but didn't leave that way. And in that revelation, the expedition realized they weren't dealing with a mere optical illusion, but a geological phenomenon unlike anything documented before. Millions of years ago, this region was a battlefield of fire, an age when the Earth tore itself open, spilling molten rock that cooled into vast basalt formations, dense, dark, and warped by unimaginable pressure, with layer upon layer of volcanic remnants accumulating to form natural lenses of stone that subtly refract heat and light. These formations don't look extraordinary from above, but underground they create a mosaic of microcliffs, angled surfaces, and warped horizons, just enough to bend incoming sunlight by fractions of a degree. Normally, the human eye would never detect such slight shifts, but shadows are perfect record keepers. As the sun crosses the sky, the plateau acts like a colossal, uneven reflector. Heat shimmer rises in thin, wavering sheets. Invisible gradients of temperature distort light before it reaches the ground. And when the sunlight finally lands, the terrain's warped microangles redirect its path just enough to make every shadow behave as if it's listening to a different sun. A shadow might stretch because a distant basalt ridge lifts the horizon by a fraction. It might tilt because a buried volcanic dome curves the light before it touches the soil. And it might shrink because heat waves deflect just enough energy to alter the illumination. The land is not flat. The land is not uniform. The land is not silent. It is geologically carved by ancient violence, cooled by time, and polished by wind, forged in an era when Earth reshaped its own skeleton and left behind scars. This is the real engine of the mystery. The Earth isn't breaking physics, it's bending perception. For centuries, people walked through this land long before any scientist pointed a laser at it. They didn't have instruments or physics, but they had eyes, instincts, and stories. Local tribes believed this was a place where shadows lived, a sacred zone where the ground was home to spirits that walked beside or ahead of a person, guiding or warning them. Hunters claimed animal silhouettes stretched toward the wrong horizon, signaling danger, and elders described the shadows as alive, shifting to communicate the moods of the earth. To early travelers, it was a place of superstition, with journals mentioning shadows slanting sideways as if following a different world, and lacking scientific language, they explained it through folklore. Shadows here were not yours. They belonged to the land. Centuries passed, belief faded, but confusion never did. And even in the modern era, hikers reported double shadows or silhouettes that leaned like drunk men. Photographers captured angles that defied terrain logic, and children pointed first, asking why their shadows didn't match those of their parents. Why the darkness on the ground moved wrong even when nothing else did. The phenomenon persisted, whispered through generations, but without scientific tools and the ability to measure microcurvatures of the land, humanity could only interpret what it saw. Before science drew maps of light, people drew stories, and in this place, the stories were not wrong, only incomplete. After decades of confusion, centuries of folklore, and a full expedition armed with modern tools, the truth stands clear, simple, elegant, and astonishing. This shadow rebellion is not because light has failed, but because the earth beneath. It writes a different script. The terrain is a living archive of ancient volcanic upheaval, its stone formations bending incoming sunlight just enough to shift what we perceive while redirecting rays by fractions of degrees the naked eye can't detect, except when those rays form a shadow that is supposed to follow the sun, but here follows the Earth's ancient memory instead. This land remembers fire, the pressure of continents splitting, the ocean of lava that hardened into mirrors of stone, the crust buckling and twisting beneath unimaginable force. And today, those silent memories shape the path of light itself. The sun tells one story, but the shadows tell another. If you enjoyed this journey into the strange and extraordinary, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves mysteries of the earth, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another discovery.